Welcome to Toy Business Unboxed, your gateway to the secrets of the toy industry. Here, Jason Shea, a toy entrepreneur and expert in the field.
Every product we develop is really inspired by some of the real life experience that we have with our son.
60% of all toys last year were sold on Amazon, which is incredible.
Be passionate about it because it's a road, it's a journey.
Like when you have an idea that you think is like gonna somewhat like change the world, make things better, I'd say go for it.
We'll guide you through the enchanting world of toy design, marketing, and manufacturing. Now let the unboxing begin.
Hi everyone, this is Jason, the host of Toy Business Unboxed. In today's episode, we sit down with Curt, a mastermind behind Smirk and Dagger Games. And Curt's innovative approach to game design combined with emotional storytelling really have created his board game into a different experience that make players feel like they are really part of a movie. And he'll share some of the insight into the power of emotionally driven gameplay and how his marketing really began as early as playtesting. And also he will share some of his thought on the changing landscape on Kickstarter and how we in the toy and game industry really expand into a broader audience. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, Curt.
Oh, my pleasure, Jason. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so first, can you start off sharing with our audience what made you kind of start this company to begin with many years ago?
Well, so it was a journey like 21 years ago where I got a start. And like most people, I had a passion for board gaming. I was a creative at a marketing agency and was looking for a little creative outlet outside of what was dictated by my clients. So I decided, let me try to build some board games. I'd already created some expansions for games that I already love for just me and my friends to play. And finally, after spending 2 years on developing new content for a game just for the kicks of it, someone said, "Hey, why don't you make your own board games?" And I'd never thought of it. And so I started trying. Yeah.
I see. That's how you got started. Okay.
Yeah.
And can you also share with the audience your first board game? What was the concept? Where do you got the idea from? And how long does that took you initially?
So when I decided to try to start making games, I came up with 3 terrible ideas. They were all really, really boring to play. There was no player interaction. They were just dull and lifeless. And so I started thinking about, well, all right, what do I really love about board games? And I happen to love, especially back then and also today, backstabbing games where you're being terrible to people. Because it's an emotional roller coaster. And so you'll shake your fist at them, you'll plan their demise, and then you'll laugh when you get a plan to go off. I loved that. So that's when I created Smirk and Dagger Games, because it's kind of the smile of thinking about what you're going to do and then landing the dagger and having a laugh about it. But once I had kind of come up with that as an idea, like how I might stand out in from other game companies, if I was actually going to go that route, I said, well, what's the simplest game I can come up with that has a lot of interaction between players, has a lot of backstabbing? And I created Hex, which was my first game. In about 2 weeks coming out of that initial thought process. Now, it developed over the course of about 1.5 years when I finally was ready to release it. But to build it, it was pretty much done in about 2 weeks.
The initial concept. Okay, got it. And you just take more time to refine the remaining of the design. And I think one thing you mentioned also, you like to talk about game being like a night at the movies. Could you also share what that means to you in terms of the game design?
Sure. So I think when you take a look at a lot of modern board games, especially these days. Back when I was a kid, games were kind of either built for kids or they were kind of roll and move. There wasn't a lot of complexity to them. Modern board
Right.
games, though, I think particularly well-built modern board games have a real narrative thread, a theme and a story that is meshed very tightly with the mechanics of playing the game. And
Mm,
so you have an experience that is kind of set up for you, and
yeah.
you're the hero. You and
Mhm.
your friends at the table, you are the characters in this story.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
if it has the ability, in some cases, to like emotionally involve you, you actually get swept up in the story of the game. You forget that the you're talking about a board game with little cardboard pieces. They
Mm,
become real things. They become the
mm.
sea life that you have to save, or they're going to perish, and they
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
something to you. Well, once you've got that kind of going, you are making real decisions at the table that will impact the end of what the movie will be. But
Mm.
you are
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
kind of interacting in that cinematic universe of the idea of the game. And
Mm,
so many games are now able to do that because they really have woven that narrative, that
mm,
thematic into the gameplay so tightly that it's not just a truly abstracted game. You start feeling
mhm.
the loss of if that little sea
Yeah.
creature dies when an oil spill covers him. Oh no, like we've lost one. And
Yeah, I think it's very important to solicit that emotional response in the player when they're playing and interacting with the pieces and
yeah,
following the rules. So
yeah. And now
and
that
like
can
you
come
mentioned,
through in like kind of role playing experiences or even just pure board gaming experiences. There are ways to, every time you create a series of rules for a board game, you're essentially creating a script.
yeah,
You are guiding players towards different paths of behavior through
mhm,
reward and punishment systems.
yeah,
If there's a good reason to do this thing, and there could be a bad thing if you don't do this other thing. And so
yeah.
you will guide them along a path, but in the end, their decisions really determine the outcome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very good point, and I think that's why it's so important for the player to feel immersed in the experience. So that way, it's a lot more interactive, just like you mentioned, and it's almost like they feel like they're part of the movie they are creating, and also have direct impact on the outcome that
Yes.
they can be part of. And I think one of the things you also focusing on with your company is to focusing on both strategy and storytelling. What are some of the design elements that you use when you're, trying to create a board game that you currently have?
So for me, the experience of a game is paramount. So when
Mhm,
I'm designing a game or working with someone who's pitched us a game and we're working to making it, the final version of that game,
mhm.
I'm really, really tightly focused on how players are experiencing what that game is,
Yeah.
and things that lead into the experience that we're trying to craft, whether it's a desperate race to save, like I said, save the sea life with our game, The Spill, or
Yeah.
if it's something where like we are joining together to vanquish monsters, or whatever the kind of narrative is,
Mhm,
anything that adds to the feeling that I'm trying to create, that's
mhm,
great. Keep it in the game, expand
mhm,
on it, grow it.
mhm,
Anything
mhm,
that's deflecting us from that and making us feel like, oh, like I now have to do math to figure out how I'm going to optimally score. That
mm.
feels less part of the kind of game experience that I want.
Yeah.
um,
Okay. Okay.
so I try to minimize those aspects and maximize
Mhm.
things that lead you into this narrative and thematic space.
Got it. And I think one thing that is unique with your professional background is you also have background in graphic design and also making cartoon in the past, right? So how does
I
that
do.
influence your approach when you are creating the board game that you currently have?
Well, what I'll say is I've been able to wear a lot of hats in my company for that reason.
Mhm.
So it streamlines the process in some regards and allows me to get more finalized, artwork and graphic design on the table sooner in the prototyping phase. And I think art and graphics not only can help people better understand the rules of a game, but can also help immerse them in the game itself. Some images are just evocative, and they draw you into to want to pick up the game, but also they draw you into the narrative of the game. So
I see.
having an eye for what those elements that I might want to add to a game, just because they help the atmosphere of the game, is something I absolutely think about.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think also when it comes to marketing is seem to be start as early as the play testing as well. How do you incorporate some of the feedback during the play testing stages when you're shaping or redesigning your game for it to come to fruition?
Yeah, this is something that I talk to up and coming designers all the time about. As you're play testing a game, and once you get beyond your friends and family and you're sharing it with people you don't know, when that's critical when you're testing a board game, because your family won't tell you your baby's ugly. So you,
you won't get very honest opinion. They won't try to protect you.
Yeah. But once you start playing with a bunch of people who really are just reacting to your game and not caring about your feelings per se, then there are a couple of things I always suggest looking for. One, not to ask at the end of a play test what they thought of it, or tell me about X, Y, or Z thing that I'm testing for. Just sit back in silence and wait for the spontaneous reactions. When you do, you learn a couple really interesting things. Which are different than if you hand someone a piece of paper and it says provide your feedback. People want to fill in all the blanks, and even if they don't think there's a problem, if you said, well, what's the thing that you like least about it, they'll fill in something, because we want to complete and do a good job for you. But if you sit in silence, what you will hear are their first impressions, their gut checks. And I listen for two critical things. One is I'm listening not for just someone to say, oh, that was fun. Oh, that was fun is not good.
Okay.
Oh, that was fun means that, I enjoyed this, but it wasn't that special. Because what you're waiting for is someone to say, oh, dude, when is this coming out?
There you go.
When they express they express a desire to own that game in some way, one, you're getting close to having it ready to publish. The other thing is when they start talking about the game, or if one of their friends comes up and says, oh, what are you doing? He's like, oh, you got to see this game because the because that they add, that is what's selling your game. Those are the things that are exciting them about your game. And every single one of those things that you constantly hear from play testers, that's how you're going to market your game, because you already now know what is selling your game, what people are excited about.
That's a really good point. And because as a creator myself, sometimes it's hard. We're kind of blindsided and we don't really know. We have like certain bias for the toys and games that we created ourselves. So sometimes we don't really know what other people are looking for, and what part of the game, the aspect that really resonate with our potential customers. So that was a really good point that you share. And based on
one other thing too is that as people start presenting their game to people, time and time again, they will find there might be a certain phrase they use, or a joke they make, or something that resonates, that always gets a laugh, that says, oh, tell me more. Like, you can see people react to some of the things that you're saying. And when you have a lot of people who they spark to something that you said, then that is another piece of your marketing. So it's both what they're telling you and what's working that you're putting out there.
Okay, that's a really good point as well. So, but based on your experience, doing all the different play testing and designing the product, what would you say is like one of like maybe the X factor that you aim for to make the game as memorable, or in your word to be like, oh, when can I have this?
Right.
When is it going to be launched so I can own one?
Well, it's interesting. Depending on the game and depending on the audience, it can be really anything. But what an X factor is, it is that almost indescribable thing that makes a difference between, oh, this is fun, to, oh, I've got to have it. Now, sometimes
Yeah,
it is just a compelling theme. It could be compelling art. It could be
yeah,
a mechanic that is just so beautifully designed that you're like, I love how this thing works. It's so like,
yeah.
it could be an interesting new challenge. Um, there's almost there's almost nothing that can't be that thing, but you
Mhm.
won't know it's the X factor until enough people start showing you by
Showing
how
you.
excited it makes them,
Mm,
and then you know it is your X factor for the game. But you
I
do
see.
need one. You need at least one thing in your game that has
Mhm.
people reacting in that way. Now,
Mm,
it
okay.
used to be that wasn't necessarily the case, but
Mhm.
there are now 5,000 board games getting released a year.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah,
It's a
yeah, yeah.
lot. And so, if you want to make sure that, people are talking about your game, they're breaking through that 5,000 games a year and getting played,
Hmm.
then yeah, you really need to wait until you've got something that is getting people talking and excited.
Talking. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's true. And one of the things that's also really big in I think, the board game industry is definitely Kickstarter. You couldn't avoid talking about it if you're in in the space.
Yeah.
And also, Kickstarter as a platform has really involved a lot in the recent year as well. Has that influenced some of your strategy when you're designing the game? Maybe trying to like tailor more toward like the potential backer that you can
Oh,
attract on Kickstarter
interesting.
in any way?
Well, I'm gonna say yes and no. And
Okay.
Kickstarter is for me fairly recent, like in the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
When people were first kickstarting, I didn't do it for a couple reasons.
Mhm.
One, at that time, I truly believed in the idea of the platform, allowing people who could not otherwise get a project done, giving them the
Mm.
ability. At that
Ability,
time,
yes, yes,
I
yes.
could pay for
Mhm.
my own board games, so I didn't go seeking funding. I
Yes.
so that seemed, not appropriate. Then at one point, the retailers, who, I count on to shelf my games, they were very upset that publishers were going to Kickstarter and didn't want to carry Kickstarted games. Well,
Yeah.
eventually, as we all know, that changed
That change, yes,
because
yes. Yeah.
what really became the case was that Kickstarter is an excellent marketing tool, probably one of the best
Yeah.
marketing tools for board games right now. And
Yeah.
it's also a potential crucible to understand the viability of a board game.
That's a good point. Yes. Yeah.
So
Mm,
retailers now look at it and say, "Oh, if it did really well on Kickstarter, it's probably going to do well in my store." And they might even
mm.
become a backer of it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Now, once that was the case, I started engaging with Kickstarter, and it
Mhm.
has changed even since I've been working on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Um, I think people have wanted different things from Kickstarter at different times, and
Yeah.
we're getting to a point right now where we're seeing you're always going to have like the big projects that explode and do $1 million
Oh, yeah.
plus,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I think there are less games that do quite as well as they used to. And I think that's
Mm.
because there is maybe a little bit of Kickstarter wear out.
Yeah.
There is the realization that sometimes projects don't go the way they should in terms of timing and
Yeah,
other things.
yeah, that
You know,
happened a lot too. Yes.
and
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when I just release a game to the marketplace, it shows up in retail and people are like, "Oh, there's a new game out." When you're
Yeah.
part of a backing a campaign and I told you it was supposed to be due in May, but all these things happened and now it's releasing much later, you
Yeah.
actually feel the same pain that I do as a publisher
Mm.
going through all those problems. And
Yeah.
some people, they don't have the patience for that. And you get to
Yeah.
see the ugly underbelly of what it takes to be a publisher. Um, but I think
Sure.
most
Yeah.
often what is really still driving Kickstarters is, do they feel that through their participation in the campaign that they are likely to get something better than was ever going to be offered before, or
Yeah.
just maybe something they can't get at retail.
True. That's why there's a lot
So
of like exclusive deals, special thing you can unlock when you hit different tiers.
yeah,
So yeah.
or sometimes it's just like deluxe editions. For example,
Mhm.
I've got a game coming up in January that
Yeah.
I'm not going to even do like the stretch goals, I think, so much because I think
Okay.
the effectiveness of what stretch goals had done, get people excited about more and more stuff being added to the game, that's
Yeah.
diminished a little bit. And I
Mm.
think that we're going out and we're saying, listen, this is going to be the retail version. The only way this crazy cool deluxe version is going to get made
Yeah.
is if we fund this campaign. And that's where people are going to be able to get the crazy, interesting materials. Otherwise,
Mm.
it'll be this game, which you can get at retail.
That's an interesting strategy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think so long as they are either helping to make the game better or get an offering that they couldn't otherwise get, then that makes for a strong campaign.
Mhm.
I think also sometimes a really special IP. When Dice Throne did the X-Men recently,
Mm.
people just were like, "Well, I love Dice Throne. I love the X-Men. Yes, and
Mhm.
if we get X, that was a stretch goal. We're like, yeah, I want the Deadpool expansion thing. We have to make sure we get there, everybody. So all
Mm.
of these tools where they think they're through their participation, they are contributing to growing that game and making it more special. That's, I think, really where Kickstarter is truly thriving now.
I see. So when you're designing, game right now, what do you find most challenging and also most rewarding about, not just serving the hobby gaming industry, but also try to, design your game in a way that is also tailored to a broader
Mm.
audience?
So that's one of the things that I've tried to do throughout my 21 years
Mhm.
is find ways to create, I think, deeper modern board games, but that are still really approachable to a casual board gaming audience.
Audience,
Um,
yeah.
and I think a lot of things can contribute to that. One,
Mhm.
making sure that it looks welcoming to a
Yeah.
wide audience is important.
Mhm.
Um, I think in the rule book, using language that doesn't sound like code. If you're a
Mm.
dyed-in-the-wool board gamer,
Yeah.
what certain terms might mean. But sometimes, if
Yeah.
we rely on those terms, we
Yeah.
exclude more casual gamers who don't know
Gamers. Yeah.
what card drafting is. Tell me
Mhm.
what the process is. You know,
Mhm.
don't always just kind of shorthand to the terminology.
Mm.
Some of it is creating experiences again that I feel create an experience or a feeling at the table. When you
Mm.
create a feeling at the table, um, not only do you elevate the experience to like, oh, kind of a dry, systematic board game to a involving experience we're all participating in, you
Mhm.
also deepen the memories that you share together. You're
Mhm.
not talking when you leave the table, you're not thinking about, oh, if only I did X, Y, and Z, I could have gotten a better score. You're thinking about,
Mm.
man, we almost didn't live from that maze. The monsters almost got us. Like, it's a
Mhm.
different conversation you're having
Different.
coming out of
Yeah.
that game.
Yeah.
And that is the
Okay.
kind of thing that also brings more people into the hobby because
Mhm.
it's not just, board games for kids or board games for nerds. It's an experience we can all enjoy. So being able to lower the threshold, make games approachable with the rules, keeping them slim and trim and written for everybody, and creating experiences that a broad audience can enjoy. Those, I think, are the keys.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really good point. So one of the last, so we're kind of approaching today's interview toward the end here. One of the questions I like to ask all the guests is, if you had to share just one piece of advice with someone that's getting started in the toy and game industry, what would that be?
It's always a big question, right? I think be guided by your passion. There's not just one way to build a board game. There are many ways, and so long as you are finding fulfillment in creating it, you're going to find an audience who appreciates it. And all the pathways may not be all the same. You might do a Kickstarter, you might license it to another publisher. There's a lot of different things that can happen. You might just share it with your own friends and family.
Yeah.
But so long as you enjoy the process and you get it out and you get the enjoyment of people's reactions, and that's what drives me to be a publisher, is I love when people show me their enjoyment of the game, and that's what gets me up every morning. So find the passion in whatever you do.
Yeah, I think that's a very important piece of advice, because not everything is easy in the publishing space, right? There's always going to be a lot of struggle. There's a lot of problem that you'll face. But if you don't have enough passion and really enjoy what you do, it's going to be a lot of a very difficult road ahead for sure. So where can people find you online?
Well, for sure at smirkandagger.com. And, on Facebook, you can find us at Smirk and Dagger as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today and sharing some of your insight. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Toy Business Unboxed podcast. We hope you have enjoyed the conversation and find it insightful and inspiring. If you like what you have heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate your support, and we love it if you can leave us a review and share the podcast with your friend and colleague. For more resource, tip, and the latest update in the toy and game industry, visit our website at toy-launch.com. Join the conversation and connect with us on social media using hashtag #ToyBusinessUnboxed. We would love to hear your feedback and suggestion for the future episode. Until next time, keep innovating, keep creating, keep bringing joys to toys. This is Jason Shea signing off on the Toy Business Unboxed podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, Curt.
You bet. Bye-bye.